In the next few videos, we're going to look at using Python 3 and working with files of data. So the kinds of things we can do with files is read data in to our program from a file, write data to a file so it's stored permanently, and then we can also think about deleting and changing the data. Now these last two things require us firstly to read data in from a file, and then to do some processing with it and then write it out, usually to a different file. Those are the things we're going to look at, and these should then help us to tackle this Python task that you've got, which makes use of the student grades text file. There's some things we need to be careful with when we're working with files of data, and one of those is to make sure that we have got a folder in which we store the Python program and the file that we are going to access, and that makes writing the programs relatively straightforward. So here I've got the student grades file in a folder called Python projects. I've also got the start of a Python file stored in the same folder. So the start of my Python file is just a comment, and then I've saved it, and this is the student grades text file, and as you can see we've got a line of headings at the top, and then we've got student codes and then marks for each of these subjects for that student. So the first thing we'll look at is how to actually read data from a file. The command for that in Python is very straightforward. We can use the open function, and then within the open function we write the name of the file that we want to open, and so I've got the student grades file at the top there, and I also have to include the extension. Now this function opens this file and it takes as a parameter the name of the file that we're going to open, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign this to a variable name. When you look this up in books and various other places, you often have people calling this variable that refers to a file either things like my file, or just some people might call it a file handle, or just file. So I'm just going to give it a name S file, just stands for student file, but this can be anything you want it to be. Open is the function, and so we've got the brackets for our function, and this function takes parameters, and one of these is the name of the file here. So then if we use open, we always have to remember that we need to be able to close the file after we've done after we've read it. So that again we can just now use the variable that opens our file and run the close function, and in between these two we can then read data from the file. So before we go any further, we're going to make sure that this works. So I'm just going to run this program, and here I don't get any errors, so my file has opened and then it has closed correctly. I can, if I wish, I can have a look at S file, which is the name of my variable, and it gives me some information. It's so you can make some guesses as to what this is. This is some kind of input-output wrapper. This is the name of my file. Mode R, this stands for the fact that this file is open for reading, and that's the default flag if you don't pass any other parameter into the open function. So once we know that's working and we don't have any errors, the most likely error is that the file isn't in the same directory as your program. Once that works, then we can read the data in from the file, and again we can give this a name, a variable name, and again to read the whole thing in, that's all of my file, into memory, I can just assign the variable name data, and I can call the read function on my file. So there's sfile.read. So reading will read in everything that is contained within the file and put it in RAM, and then obviously we can process that however we want to. So let's make sure that this also works. So this runs. I can now type in just data, which is the name of my variable here, which basically is the result of reading all of the data that makes up S-file, and S-file is this particular file here. So if I just type in data into shell, I get all of the text which makes up the student grades file over here. And what's interesting about this file is it doesn't look like this particular one. It's because when it's stored as text on the hard drive, then it also stores these non-printable characters which you can't see, they just appear as spaces. So here's \T, which is the tab character, and that's separating out the heading, so it's separating out student ID in English. And then at the end of music here, so if I just go up to music, I've got \N, and \N is the new line character, and that's what causes the next row of data to be written on line 2. So this is quite useful to see how the data is read in. Now, this is one giant string, so you can tell that because there's a quote there and an end quote here. So all of this data is read in as one giant string, and usually it's not useful for us to have a giant string of data. We normally read it in using various other functions which allow us to read lines of data and remove new lines and things like that. But getting used to the pattern is very handy, because when we write data to a file, then we can follow the same pattern that we see in the data here.